Last night on this show, we aired part one of my interview with the man who authored and introduced legislation known by its cute nickname, the Kill the Gays Bill. This is a bill that exists in a foreign country. This is not an American bill or an American proposal. The reason the story of this bill has become American news is that the guy proposing it, the man who authored it and is lobbying for it around the world, including here, is a political product in many ways of the secretive religious group known as The Family. The Family operates the C Street house, where a number of members of Congress live in Washington, and which has been tied to a number of recent Republican sex scandals. The Family, also known as The Fellowship, has an extensive international network that in part identifies and trains and supports and promotes the careers of guys like David Bahati, the man who authored the Kill the Gays bill. According to Jeff Charlotte, who has done more than the lion's share of the reporting on this subject, Mr. Bahati is himself a member of the Family, very well connected with very influential members of the Family who are politicians in the United States, and he is the leader for the Family in his own country's parliament. For his latest book, which is called C Street, Jeff Charlotte traveled to Uganda to investigate that connection. He says in the book, quote, "When I asked David Bahati if there was any connection between the Fellowship or the Family in Uganda and his legislation, he seemed puzzled by the question. I do not know what you mean, connection," he said. "There's no connection. They are the same thing. The bill is the Fellowship. It was our idea." The Kill the Gays bill and the American-backed version of the Family in Uganda, he says, are the same thing. In just a moment, Jeff Charlotte will tell us the importance of what Mr. Bahati admitted to me. But first, here's the close of my interview with David Bahati, including what he said when I asked him directly about his visits to America and C Street and the Family.
Homosexuality is not a way of life that we accept in our country. It's not part of our culture. It's not part of God's law. And this is Uganda.
What is God's law about homosexuality?
God's law is that homosexuality is sin.
Punishable by?
God's law is that homosexuality is sin.
In your view, does God's law prescribe an appropriate punishment for that sin?
God's law is always clear that the wages of sin is death. Whether that is implemented through a legislation like mine or by a mechanism of a human being, whatever happens is the end result that we need to turn to God if we have sinned.
All right, let me ask you one last thing. Are you part of the Fellowship, the group known as the Family here in the United States?
It is true that I've attended a national prayer breakfast here for 2 times. And we have friends in the fellowship. We have a fellowship in Uganda that's associated with the fellowship in Washington.
I understand that you first publicly floated the idea for this bill at an event associated with the Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast. Has anybody from the fellowship or the Family in the United States encouraged you to drop the bill?
I know some people have different views in the fellowship about this bill. There are people who oppose it, but we have said this Uganda is Uganda. This legislation is for Uganda, not for America, and therefore it's not right for Americans to interfere with a process that is democratic in a democratic parliament. So there's no one who has discouraged me and no one who has encouraged me.
Are you staying with a member of the Family while you're here in the United States? You're not? Are you staying with a man named Jack Clank?
Yeah.
Is Jack Clank a former federal education official in the United States?
I think the purpose why we're on this show is to talk about the bill. It's not talk about the person I know in America. I know so many people.
So you don't have any comment on whether or not Jack Clank is a former senior official in the Department of Education under the Bush administration?
That's really not my my purpose here to talk about Jack. My purpose is to talk about the bill. Jack is a friend, is a friend, and I have so many friends in America, but all these people are not associated with the bill. They have nothing to do with the bill. It's just an opinion that I have, which can be accepted by Parliament. It can be dropped. It can be amended. It's something that our population require, and it has really nothing to do with anybody in America. And we do respect the opinions of Americans. We respect the opinions of the international community. And as we move towards passing of this bill, you will see all these views come into the bill. And at the end of the day, we shall have a wonderful piece of legislation that protects the future of our children, works within international law, that reflects the spirit of tolerance and respect for one another and understanding for one another.
It is more than your opinion, sir. It is proposed legislation to subject to life imprisonment or possibly execution a relatively significant portion of the population. Okay, life imprisonment, even if you take the execution part of it out, to subject to life imprisonment a relatively significant portion of the population of your country. Because of that, it's more than your opinion. It is the thing that has made you internationally famous, and it may be the thing ultimately that results in you being charged with crimes against humanity in some sort of international tribunal. If that happens, sir, I wish you luck in your defense, but I don't expect it'll go far.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Mr. David Bahati, a member of the Ugandan Parliament. We'll be right back.